At first glance, a medieval village looks fragile. A cluster of timber houses, a dirt road, a church spire rising above fields. Hardly the image of a fortress. And yet, across Europe, entire communities transform themselves into defensive strongholds without ever becoming castles. That is the mystery. How did farmers and craftsmen, with no royal treasury and no standing army, turn ordinary settlements into barriers against raiders, rival lords, and invading forces? Imagine waking before dawn to the sound of distant hoofbeats. In places like Carcassonne in southern France, what began as a modest settlement evolved into layered defences shaped by generations of fear and ingenuity. But even smaller villages, far from famous citadels, learned to harden themselves. They bent streets, raised earth, dug ditches, and aligned homes like shields. The result was something remarkable. A living organism of defence, grown from necessity, rooted in cooperation, and designed to make any attacker think twice. During the early Middle Ages, especially after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, centralized protection weakened across much of Europe. Raids by Vikings, Magyar horsemen, and local war bands made rural life unpredictable. In regions along the Seine River in France, or across Anglo-Saxon England, villages faced sudden violence without warning. Castles existed, yes, but they were often miles away, reserved for lords and their retainers. Ordinary people could not rely solely on distant stone fortresses. So gradually, from the 9th through the 12th centuries, communities adapted. In parts of Germany and Eastern Europe, circular Slavic ring villages were constructed with homes forming an outer defensive wall. In Italy, hilltop settlements known as borghi clustered tightly along ridges, reducing exposed approaches. The famous walled city of Carcassonne represents the extreme example, but countless unnamed villages follow similar logic on a smaller scale. Over generations, defence stopped being an emergency measure and became an architectural instinct embedded in the village layout itself. So, how exactly did a simple farming village become a stronghold? Imagine starting with the land. First, choose elevation whenever possible. A gentle hill provides visibility and forces attackers to climb, slowing them down. Next, shape the perimeter. Villagers dug ditches, piling the excavated earth inward to create embankments called ramparts. You know, it is basic physics. Height and angle multiply defensive advantage. Then they planted thick hedges, sometimes hawthorn, along the crest. Living walls that grew denser each year. Houses were built tightly together, often sharing walls, forming a continuous outer ring with few ground-level openings. Streets were intentionally narrow and winding. Why winding? Because a straight road invites a charging force. A curved lane breaks momentum and creates choke points. Gates were simple but strategic, reinforced with timber and placed where defenders could gather quickly. Wells were dug within the perimeter to ensure water during siege. It was not grand engineering, but it was precise, practical, and born from shared knowledge, passed quietly from village to village. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. What is striking is how relevant these principles remain. Today, urban planners talk about resilient communities, about designing neighbourhoods that can withstand natural disasters or social unrest. Medieval villagers were already practicing resilience. They understood layered defence. First the terrain, then the ditch, then the hedge, then the houses, then the inner square. Modern security design follows the same pattern, from airport perimeters to digital firewalls. Even the idea of narrow, traffic-calming streets in modern towns echoes those winding medieval lanes that slowed invaders. And consider food security. By storing grain within protected areas and maintaining wells inside the village boundary, communities reduced dependence on vulnerable external supply lines. In a world facing climate disruptions, that lesson feels urgent again. There is also a social lesson. Cooperation was survival. These were not luxuries, but necessities. When we design neighbourhoods today, whether physical or digital, the medieval model reminds us that strength is rarely about a single massive wall. It is about many thoughtful layers working together. In the end, medieval villages did something extraordinary. Without architects in grand courts or engineers with advanced mathematics, they transformed vulnerability into structure. They read the land, studied the patterns of attack, and quietly reshaped their world. What appears to us as quaint winding streets or charming clustered cottages often hides a blueprint for survival. Every bend in the road, every hedgerow, every elevated church tower once carried intention. These villages were not passive victims of history. Security does not always arrive from above. Sometimes it grows from the ground up, from neighbours who decide to build wisely and stand together. As you walk through any old European town today, imagine the invisible geometry of protection beneath your feet. The ditches filled in, the gates long gone, the hedges trimmed back. The spirit of adaptation still lingers. If this story changed the way you see those quiet stone streets and rolling fields, there is more hidden architecture waiting to be uncovered and more forgotten wisdom ready to guide the future. And more forgotten wisdom ready to guide the future. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned.